3 years ago, I thought my biggest problem was choosing between vanilla and chocolate wedding cake. I never imagined I'd be standing in my bridal suite, staring at the man who broke my heart, while he explained that someone wanted me dead and he was now legally obligated to keep me alive. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Jessica Martinez, and my wedding day started like a scene from a romantic comedy, right up until it turned into a psychological thriller. It was 6 a.m. when my phone started buzzing with what I assumed were congratulatory messages. Instead, I found 17 missed calls from my mother, Patricia, and a text that made my stomach drop. "Sweetheart, I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of adding someone to the guest list. Trust me on this one." I should have known something was wrong when she used the words, "trust me." My mother had a talent for making decisions that she believed were in my best interest, regardless of whether I agreed, like the time she signed me up for salsa dancing lessons because she thought I needed to loosen up, or when she convinced my college roommate to set me up on blind dates because I was too focused on my studies. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Riverside Manor in Connecticut, a picturesque venue my fiancé David and I had chosen specifically because it felt intimate and private. We'd planned everything meticulously: 150 guests, garden ceremony, reception in the grand ballroom. David worked in finance, steady and reliable, everything I thought I wanted after years of chaos in my previous relationship. My bridesmaids, my sister Carmen, my college friends Riley and Hannah, and David's sister Michelle had arrived at 7 a.m. to start the preparation process. The suite smelled like hairspray and champagne, and everyone was in that giddy pre-wedding mood where everything seems hilarious and magical. "Who did your mom add to the list?" Carmen asked while the makeup artist worked on my eyes. Carmen knew our mother better than anyone and could read the subtle signs of her interference from miles away. "I tried calling Patricia back, but it went straight to voicemail. She's probably at the flower market making sure the arrangements are perfect," I said, though I felt an uncomfortable knot forming in my stomach. By 10 a.m., I was fully dressed in my grandmother's restored vintage gown, a stunning ivory creation with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral train that had been in our family for 3 generations. Looking in the mirror, I felt beautiful and confident, ready to marry the man who had been my steady companion for the past 2 years. Then, Carmen's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed. "It's Mom. She says she needs to talk to you immediately." I took the phone, expecting another crisis about centerpieces or seating arrangements. Instead, my mother's voice was unusually serious. "Jessica, honey, I need you to sit down." "Mom, I'm getting married in 4 hours. Whatever it is." "Blake is here." The room went silent. Even the makeup artist stopped what she was doing. Blake Harrison, my ex-boyfriend of 3 years, the man I'd lived with, planned a future with, and thought I was going to marry until everything fell apart in the most spectacular way possible. We'd been together through college and 2 years beyond, a passionate, intense relationship that burned bright and crashed hard. "What do you mean Blake is here?" I managed to say. "He's at the venue. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Something about your safety." Riley grabbed my arm. "Jess, you're shaking." I hadn't seen Blake in over a year, not since that horrible day when I'd found out he'd been lying to me about almost everything. His job, his family, his past, all of it fabricated. When I confronted him, he'd disappeared without explanation, leaving me to pick up the pieces of what I thought was my life. "Tell him to leave," I said into the phone. "This is my wedding day." "Jessica, he's not just Blake anymore. He's Agent Harrison with the FBI, and he says you're in immediate danger." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. FBI? Blake had told me he worked in IT consulting. He traveled frequently for client meetings, was always vague about his projects, and had an unusual number of skills that seemed unrelated to computer programming, like knowing how to disable security systems and speaking multiple languages fluently.
Carmen picked up the phone and talked quietly with our mother while I sat in the ornate chair, trying to process this information. Blake was FBI. Blake was here, on my wedding day.
"He's coming up to the bridal suite," Carmen said after hanging up. Mom couldn't stop him. Hannah started pacing. "This is insane. You can't let your ex disrupt your wedding, FBI or not." But Michelle, who worked as a paralegal and had a more practical understanding of law enforcement, looked concerned. "If he's really FBI and he says you're in danger, we should probably listen." Before anyone could respond, there was a firm knock on the door. My heart hammered against my ribs as Carmen went to answer it. Blake stood in the doorway, and seeing him again was like being hit by lightning. He'd always been handsome in that effortless way that made you forget to breathe, but now he looked different, more serious, more controlled. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and there was something in his dark eyes that hadn't been there before. Authority. Danger. "Hello, Jessica. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." "Get out," I said, finding my voice. "You have no right to be here." He stepped into the room despite my protest, and I noticed the slight bulge under his jacket that suggested he was armed. "I wish I could respect that, but your life is in danger and I've been assigned as your protection detail." "My what?" Blake looked at my bridesmaids and then back at me. "Can we have some privacy?" "Absolutely not," Riley said firmly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of us." He nodded, seeming to expect this response. 3 days ago, our office received credible intelligence that someone has put a contract out on Jessica Martinez. The target date is today, during your wedding. The room felt like it was spinning. "That's impossible. Who would want to hurt me? I'm a high school English teacher." "It's connected to your father's work," Blake said. "We believe his latest investigative piece has put both of you in danger." My father, Roberto Martinez, was an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing corporate corruption and political scandals. His work had earned him numerous awards, and apparently some very dangerous enemies. We've been monitoring the situation for weeks, hoping to identify the threat before it escalated. When we learned about the wedding, we knew it would be the perfect opportunity for someone to act. "This is crazy," Hannah said. "If this is real, why didn't you contact her directly? Why show up like this?" Blake's jaw tightened slightly. "Because Jessica has every reason not to trust me, and we were hoping to handle this without disrupting her life. But the intelligence changed overnight. The threat is immediate." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this composed, professional man with the Blake I'd known and loved. "You lied to me about everything. Your job, your life." "I was undercover," he said simply. "I couldn't tell you the truth." "For 3 years?" "It was a long-term assignment, and it wasn't supposed to involve anyone else." Carmen stepped forward. "If this is real, what does it mean for the wedding?" Blake looked at me with something that might have been regret. "It means I'm going to be staying very close to Jessica until we eliminate the threat. Starting right now." The silence that followed Blake's declaration stretched uncomfortably long. Michelle was the first to speak. "So what exactly does staying very close mean?" she asked, crossing her arms. Blake pulled out his phone and showed us a photograph. Grainy surveillance footage of a man in a baseball cap entering what looked like a hotel lobby. "This is Vincent Kozlov, a contract killer with ties to Eastern European organized crime. He arrived in Connecticut yesterday morning. We have reason to believe he's already surveilling the venue." My legs felt weak. I sank back into the chair, careful not to wrinkle my grandmother's dress. This can't be happening. What did Dan write about? What story could possibly be worth killing someone over? Blake hesitated, and I caught something flickering across his face. Concern, maybe even fear. "Your father has been investigating a money laundering operation that involves several high-profile politicians and business leaders. The story is set to publish next week. Someone wants to send him a message." "By killing his daughter on her wedding day?" Riley said flatly.
It's psychological warfare. Maximum impact, maximum pain. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off.
Hannah had been quietly listening, but now she stepped forward. Okay, assuming this is all true, what's the plan? Cancel the wedding? No, I said immediately, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm not letting some criminal destroy the most important day of my life. Blake's eyebrows rose slightly. Jessica, I understand the sentiment, but nothing. I stood up, feeling stronger now that I'd made a decision. If you're really FBI, then do your job. Protect me while I get married. It would be much safer to postpone. I've already postponed my life once because of you, I interrupted. I'm not doing it again. The room fell quiet again, but this time, the silence was charged with a different energy. Blake studied my face for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of the man I used to know, the one who understood my stubborn streak better than anyone. All right, he said finally, but we do this my way. No arguments, no deviations from the security protocol I'm about to outline. Carmen looked skeptical. What about David? Shouldn't someone tell the groom that his bride is apparently being hunted by assassins? My stomach lurched. David. Sweet, uncomplicated David who thought the biggest drama in our relationship was my occasional tendency to rearrange furniture at midnight. How was I supposed to explain that my ex-boyfriend, the one he knew almost nothing about because I'd been too hurt to talk about Blake, was now my FBI bodyguard? I'll handle David, I said, though I had no idea how. Blake was already making phone calls, speaking in low, clipped tones to what I assumed were other agents. I caught fragments. Perimeter secured, additional units, church sweep complete. While he coordinated with his team, Carmen pulled me aside. Jess, are you sure about this? Going through with the wedding, I mean. I looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup was still perfect. My hair elegantly styled, the dress fitting like it was made for me. I looked like a bride ready for her fairy tale wedding. But inside, I felt like I was starting at the edge of a cliff. I love David. He's good and kind and stable. Everything I need after Blake, Carmen finished. After Blake, I agreed. Blake ended his call and turned back to us. Here's what's going to happen. The venue has been swept and secured. We have agents positioned as guests throughout the ceremony and reception. I'll be your +1. My what? I stared at him. Your mother already added me to the guest list, remember? As far as anyone knows, I'm an old family friend who flew in at the last minute. Riley laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is surreal. What about David? Michelle asked. What are you going to tell him? Before I could answer, there was another knock on the door. Carmen opened it to reveal David himself, looking handsome in his black tuxedo, but wearing an expression of confusion. Hey, beautiful, he said, stepping into the room. His eyes immediately found Blake, and his smile faltered. I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Blake extended his hand with professional courtesy. Blake Harrison. I'm an old friend of Jessica's family. David shook his hand, but I could see him processing Blake's appearance. The height, the build, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. David was smart enough to recognize a threat when he saw one, even if he couldn't identify exactly what kind of threat it was. David, what are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Aren't you supposed to avoid seeing the bride before the ceremony? I wanted to give you this, he said, pulling a small blue velvet box from his pocket. It was my grandmother's, something blue for today. He opened it to reveal a delicate sapphire bracelet, and my heart clenched with guilt. Here was this wonderful man, trying to make our wedding day special, while I stood surrounded by secrets and danger and my armed ex-boyfriend. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. David fastened it around my wrist, his fingers gentle and familiar. But when he looked up at me, his eyes were troubled. Jessica, is everything all right? Your mom seemed strange when I saw her downstairs, and now there's a guest I've never heard of, and everyone in this room looks like someone died. I glanced at Blake, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. We'd agreed that I would handle David, but Blake was clearly prepared to step in if necessary. There's been a small complication, I said carefully. Nothing that should affect the wedding, but my father's work has created some security concerns. David's brow furrowed. What kind of security concerns? The kind that require additional precautions, Blake interjected smoothly. I'm with a private security firm that specializes in protecting journalists and their families. Just a precautionary measure. It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. David looked between Blake and me, clearly sensing that something bigger was happening. Jessica, he said quietly, you can tell me anything. You know that, right? The sincerity in his voice nearly broke me. David deserved so much better than a bride with a dangerous past and a complicated present, but I also knew that telling him the complete truth would only put him in more danger. I know, I said, taking his hands, and I promise I'll explain everything later, but right now I just need you to trust me. David searched my face for a long moment, then nodded. Always, he said simply. After he left, promising to see me at the altar, Blake checked his watch. We need to move to the venue in 30 minutes. The ceremony location has been secured, but transport is when you'll be most vulnerable. Carmen started gathering our things while Hannah and Riley peppered Blake with questions about the security arrangements. Michelle, ever practical, was already researching Vincent Kozlov on her phone. He's killed 12 people, all of them connected to people who crossed certain business interests. Michelle, stop, Carmen said firmly. That's not helping anyone's nerves right now. But I was oddly calm now that the decision was made. I was going to marry David, surrounded by friends and family, protected by the one man who had always been able to keep me safe, even when he was breaking my heart. As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, Blake approached me one more time. Jessica, he said quietly, I want you to know I never stopped caring about what happened to you. I looked at him, this man who had been my whole world before he disappeared from it, and felt the familiar ache of old wounds. But you left anyway. I had to, he said. It wasn't safe for you to be involved in my world. And now? His expression grew grim. Now my world has come to find you whether I wanted it to or not. The ride to Riverside Manor felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Blake had arranged for us to travel in an unmarked SUV with tinted windows, driven by Agent Sarah Chen, a petite woman with sharp eyes who looked like she could take down someone twice her size without breaking a sweat. Carmen sat beside me in the back seat, holding my hand, while Blake occupied the front passenger seat, constantly scanning the road ahead and behind us. His earpiece crackled occasionally with updates from his team. Perimeter is secured, no sign of our target at the venue. Copy that, Blake responded. We're 2 minutes out. I watched the familiar Connecticut countryside roll past the windows and tried to center myself. In less than an hour, I would be walking down an aisle toward David, promising to love and honor him for the rest of my life. The fact that I was doing it under FBI protection seemed almost surreal. How many agents are at the venue? Carmen asked Blake. 12 positioned as guests, 3 more as catering staff, and 2 as photographers. Plus, local law enforcement has increased patrols in the area. Agent Chen spoke up from the driver's seat. Ma'am, when we arrive, Agent Harrison will escort you directly to the preparation area behind the altar. No detours, no stops to greet guests. As we pulled into the circular driveway of Riverside Manor, I could see guests already arriving. My heart swelled seeing familiar faces, my college professors, David's colleagues, or extended families. They looked so happy and normal, completely unaware that this wedding had become a potential crime scene. Patricia was waiting at the entrance, wringing her hands nervously. She practically pulled me out of the SUV. Jessica, thank God you're here. I've been worried sick ever since. She stopped when she saw Blake emerge from the passenger side. Agent Harrison, any updates?
The venue is secure for now, Mrs. Martinez, Blake said professionally, but we need to get Jessica inside immediately. My mother led us through a side entrance I'd never noticed before, directly into a small room behind the altar area. The space was decorated with white roses and had a perfect view of the ceremony setup through a gauze curtain. David's already in position, Patricia said, checking her watch. The processional starts in 15 minutes. Through the curtain, I could see the garden ceremony space filled with white chairs arranged in neat rows. An archway of climbing roses framed the altar, and soft string lights created a romantic ambiance despite the afternoon sun. David stood at the front with his groomsmen, looking nervous but excited. "He has no idea about any of this," I murmured, watching him adjust his tie for the third time. Blake appeared beside me, close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne. "He doesn't need to know. After today, once we've identified and neutralized the threat, you can go back to your normal life." "Can I, though?" I turned to face him. "Blake, someone tried to kill me because of a story my father wrote. What happens when he writes the next one?" Before Blake could answer, Agent Chen's voice came through his earpiece urgently. "We have a problem. White male, approximately 6'2", black hair, just entered through the main gate. He's not on the guest list." Blake immediately went into high alert mode, pressing his finger to his earpiece. "Description matches our target. Where is he now?" "Moving toward the ceremony area. He's wearing a dark suit, carrying what appears to be a camera bag." My blood ran cold. "The photographer?" "We have 2 agents posing as photographers. This isn't one of ours," Blake said grimly. Patricia had overheard enough to understand something was wrong. "What's happening? Should we evacuate?" Blake was already moving toward the door. "No sudden movements. Chen, I need eyes on all exits. Martina's family stays in this room until I give the all clear." "Blake, wait!" I called after him. He turned back, and for a moment his professional mask slipped, revealing genuine concern. "Stay here," he said firmly. "No matter what you hear, do not leave this room." He disappeared through the door, leaving me with Carmen, Patricia, and the growing sound of guests chatting outside. Through the gauze curtain, I could see David checking his watch, probably wondering where his bride was. "This is insane," Carmen whispered. "How is this actually happening?" Patricia paced the small space like a caged animal. "I should never have let Roberto publish that story. I told him it was too dangerous, but he insisted the public had a right to know." "Mom, where is Dad right now?" I asked, suddenly realizing I hadn't seen him since arriving. Her face paled. "He's supposed to be walking you down the aisle. He said he was going to check the perimeter one more time before the ceremony." My heart stopped. "He's outside? Alone?" Before anyone could stop me, I pushed through the door into the main hallway. I could hear Blake's voice somewhere ahead, coordinating with his team, but I needed to find my father. The manor's main floor was bustling with activity. Caterers prepared for the reception, guests mingled in the cocktail area, and everything looked perfectly normal except for the subtle presence of Blake's agents scattered throughout. I spotted my father near the front entrance, talking to someone I didn't recognize, a tall man with dark hair carrying a camera bag. "Dad," I called out, lifting my dress to move faster. Both men turned toward me. The stranger's eyes met mine, and I saw something cold and calculating in his expression that made my skin crawl. This had to be Vincent Kozlov. "Jessica, you look beautiful, mija," my father said, completely oblivious to the danger. "I was just talking to this photographer about getting some candid shots before the ceremony." Kozlov smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations on your wedding day, Miss Martinez. I hope it's everything you dreamed of." His accent was subtle but detectable, and something about the way he said my name made me want to run. I looked around desperately for Blake or any of his agents. "Actually, I think we have enough photographers already. The ceremony is about to start." "Of course," Kozlov said pleasantly. "I was just leaving anyway."
He started to walk away, but then stopped and turned back. "Oh, Miss Martinez? Your father's work is very illuminating. I'm sure many people will find his upcoming article quite interesting." The threat in his words was unmistakable. This man knew exactly who I was and why he was here. "Dad, we need to go inside right now," I said urgently, grabbing Roberto's arm. "Jessica, what's wrong? You look pale." Before I could answer, Blake appeared at my elbow as if he'd materialized from thin air. His hand was inside his jacket, clearly ready to draw his weapon. "Mr. Martinez, we need to get you and Jessica to a secure location immediately," he said in a low, urgent voice. "Where's the photographer?" I asked, looking around frantically. "Gone," Blake said grimly. "He left through the parking area when he saw me approaching. But Jessica, he wasn't here to take pictures." Blake's earpiece crackled again. Harrison, we found a device in the Rose Arch. Bomb squad is en route, but we need to evacuate the ceremony area now. The blood drained from my face. There's a bomb? A small explosive device hidden in the floral arrangements, Blake confirmed, probably triggered by remote detonation. He was planning to wait until you were at the altar. Roberto finally understood what was happening. Dios mío. Jessica, this is because of my story. Dad, we'll deal with that later, I said, though my voice was shaking. Blake, what about the guests? What about David? My team is conducting a quiet evacuation under the guise of a minor delay. David thinks there's an issue with the sound system. I could hear people moving around outside, but it sounded controlled, not panicked. Blake's agents were apparently very good at their jobs. The device has been neutralized, came the voice through Blake's earpiece. Venue is secure for now, but we recommend relocating the ceremony. Blake looked at me seriously. Jessica, we can't stay here. Kozlov knows our location, and he'll likely try again. We need to move you somewhere safe. I looked toward the ceremony area where my dream wedding was supposed to take place, then at my father, whose investigative work had put us all in danger, and finally at Blake, the man whose job it was to keep me alive, but whose presence had already turned my wedding day upside down. Where would we go? I asked. Blake checked his phone. There's a secure federal facility about an hour from here. We can hold a small ceremony there with immediate family only. You want me to get married in a government building? I want you to get married alive, Blake said bluntly. Through the window, I could see David talking with his groomsmen, probably wondering why his bride was nowhere to be found on what was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives together. Absolutely not, I said firmly, surprising everyone, including myself. I'm not getting married in some sterile government building because of some criminal. Blake's jaw tightened. Jessica, this isn't about your wedding preferences anymore. This is about keeping you alive. Then do your job and keep me alive here, I shot back. This is my wedding day, at the venue David and I chose, with the people we love. I'm not letting Vincent Kozlov take that away from me. My father stepped between us. Maija, maybe Agent Harrison is right. Your safety is more important than… No, Dad. I turned to face him, feeling a surge of anger I hadn't expected. Your story put us in this position. The least you can do is support me in finishing what we started. Roberto's face crumpled with guilt, and I immediately regretted my harsh words. But I was tired of everyone else making decisions about my life. Blake disappearing without explanation 3 years ago, my mother inviting him to my wedding, and now the FBI trying to relocate my entire ceremony. Blake was speaking rapidly into his earpiece, coordinating with his team. When he finished, he looked at me with a mixture of frustration and admiration. If we're staying, then we're doing this completely differently, he said. The ceremony location moves to the indoor ballroom. Smaller space, better control. Guest list gets cut to immediate family only. Everyone else gets moved to a secondary location for the reception later. How are you going to explain that to 150 people? Carmen asked. Agent Chen appeared beside us, having materialized as silently as Blake always did. We're telling them there's a gas leak in the garden area. Maintenance issues, nothing serious, just a precaution. The story will hold long enough to get the ceremony done. Patricia looked overwhelmed. But the flowers, the archway, all the decorations… Can be moved, Blake said curtly. My team is already handling it. Jessica, you have 15 minutes to decide who stays and who goes. The next quarter hour was a whirlwind of impossible decisions. David's parents, confused but trusting. My aunts and uncles, disappointed but understanding. College friends who'd traveled from across the country, now being redirected to a nearby restaurant to wait for the reception. The hardest part was explaining to David without explaining anything at all. A gas leak? He repeated, when Blake delivered the news. That seems like a pretty serious safety issue. Just a precautionary measure, Blake replied smoothly. The ceremony will proceed as planned, just in a different location within the venue. David looked at me searchingly. Jessica, what's really going on? And don't tell me nothing, because you've been acting strange all day. I took his hands, feeling the weight of my grandmother's engagement ring and the sapphire bracelet he'd given me that morning. This man deserved honesty, but honesty might get him killed. There have been some security concerns related to my father's work, I said carefully. Agent Harrison is here to make sure nothing disrupts our wedding. Security concerns serious enough to require an FBI agent? Blake stepped forward before I could answer. Mr. Williams, I understand your confusion. But right now, the most important thing is getting you and Jessica married safely. Everything else can be explained later. David studied Blake's face for a long moment, and I could see him noting details. The way Blake carried himself, the bulge of the weapon under his jacket, the professional distance that didn't quite mask his personal investment in my safety. You're not just any FBI agent, are you? David said quietly. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Blake's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. I'm the agent assigned to protect Jessica, Blake said evenly. That's not what I asked. Before the conversation could go further, Agent Chen interrupted. We need to move. The ballroom is ready, and we have confirmation that Kozlov has left the immediate area, but that doesn't mean he won't return. The indoor ballroom at Riverside Manor was smaller than the garden space, but equally elegant. Someone, probably Blake's incredibly efficient team, had managed to recreate our ceremony setup with remarkable speed. The rose archway stood at the front of the room, white chairs arranged for our immediate families, and soft lighting that made everything feel intimate rather than cramped. My remaining bridesmaids, Carmen, Riley, and Hannah, looked beautiful but tense. David's groomsmen seemed confused but game for whatever was happening. The efficient, Reverend Thompson, appeared more concerned about the spiritual significance of the day than the unusual circumstances surrounding it. Are you ready? Patricia asked, adjusting my veil one final time. I looked around the room at the faces of the people who mattered most to me. My family, David's family, our closest friends. This wasn't the wedding I'd planned, but it was still our wedding. I'm ready, I said. The ceremony began with soft piano music, played by David's cousin, Maria. As the bridesmaids walked down the aisle, I noticed Blake positioned near the back corner of the room, his eyes constantly scanning for threats rather than watching the procession. Then it was my turn. My father offered me his arm, and we began the walk toward David. Despite everything that had happened, this moment felt sacred. David's face lit up when he saw me, and for a few seconds I forgot about assassins and bombs and my complicated history with the man guarding my life. You look incredible, David whispered as my father placed my hand in his. Reverend Thompson began the ceremony with words about love enduring through challenges and adversity. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering the very literal challenges we were currently enduring. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the presence of family and friends to witness and celebrate the union of Jessica Martinez and David Williams. I tried to focus on the words, on David's face, on the moment I'd been dreaming about for months. But part of my attention remained hyper-aware of Blake's presence, of the agent's position throughout the room, of the danger that might still be lurking outside. Do you, Jessica Marie Martinez, take David Allen Williams to be your lawfully wedded husband? The question I'd been waiting to answer for 2 years, the commitment I'd been ready to make when I woke up that morning. But now, standing here with my ex-boyfriend acting as my bodyguard and a contract killer somewhere in Connecticut, the words felt more complicated. I looked at David, kind, stable, uncomplicated David, who deserved a wife who could give him her whole heart without reservation. I do, I said, meaning it despite everything. Do you, David Allen Williams, take Jessica Marie Martinez to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, David replied without hesitation, though his eyes held questions I couldn't answer. As we exchanged rings, Blake's earpiece crackled with an urgent transmission. I saw him tense and move closer to the front of the room. With the power vested in me by the state of Connecticut, I now pronounce you husband and wife. David, you may kiss your bride. David's kiss was gentle and familiar, and for a moment I felt like we might actually pull this off. We were married. Despite everything, we had actually gotten married. The small crowd erupted in applause, and I smiled genuinely for the first time all day. But my relief was short-lived. Blake was suddenly beside us, his hand on my elbow. We need to leave, he said urgently. Right now. What's happening? David demanded. Kozlov is back, Blake said grimly, and this time he brought friends. The sound of breaking glass from somewhere in the manor shattered the celebratory atmosphere like a gunshot. Blake immediately pushed me behind the makeshift altar while speaking rapidly into his comm. All units, we have multiple hostiles breaching the perimeter. Wedding party needs immediate extraction. David grabbed my arm, his face pale but determined. Jessica, what the hell is going on? Who is Vincent Kozlov? Before I could answer, Agent Chen burst through the ballroom's main entrance. Harrison, we've got at least 4 armed men moving through the building. They've cut the power to the security system. The emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows across the room. Our wedding guests, my aunts, David's parents, our siblings, looked terrified and confused. Carmen was trying to keep Patricia calm, while Riley and Hannah huddled together near the piano. Chen, get the families to the safe room in the basement, Blake ordered. Now. I'm not leaving Jessica, David said firmly. Yes, you are, Blake replied without looking at him, his weapon now drawn. Your job is to stay alive so your wife has a husband to come home to. The possessiveness in Blake's voice wasn't lost on anyone, especially David. Even in the midst of this crisis, I could see my new husband processing the implications of Blake's words and tone. David, please, I said, taking his hand. Go with your family. Let Blake do his job. David's eyes searched my face. This man isn't just your bodyguard, is he? The question hung between us as another crash echoed from the hallway, closer this time. There was no time for explanations or confessions. He's the person keeping me alive right now, I said. That's all that matters. David looked like he wanted to argue, but his father, a retired military colonel, understood tactical situations. Son, sometimes the best way to protect someone is to get out of the way of the professionals. Agent Chen was already herding the families toward a service door I hadn't noticed before. This way, everyone stay low and move quickly. As they filed out, David turned back to me one more time. I love you, Mrs. Williams. The use of my new married name hit me like a physical blow. I was Mrs. Williams now, but I was also the woman whose life depended on Blake Harrison, the man who'd broken my heart 3 years ago. I love you too, I whispered back. Once the families were evacuated, Blake's entire demeanor shifted. The professional FBI agent disappeared, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. How many rounds do you have left? He asked Agent Chen. Full clip plus 2 backups, she replied. Good. They're going to try to flush us out by cutting off our exits. Blake turned to me. Jessica, I need you to listen very carefully. When I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to hide, you hide. No questions, no hesitation. Blake, how many people are we talking about? Kozlov plus 3 others, possibly more. Professional killers, well armed, and they know the layout of this building. Agent Chen's earpiece crackled with updates from the other agents. Harrison, Rodriguez, and Martinez have the north wing secure, but Johnson isn't responding from his position near the kitchen. Blake's expression darkened. They got Johnson. The reality of the situation hit me fully. People were dying because of me, because of my father's story, because someone wanted to send a message written in blood. There has to be another way out of this, I said desperately. There is, Blake said grimly. We eliminate the threat. The ballroom door burst open, and I screamed before realizing it was Agent Rodriguez, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but still mobile. They're in the main hallway, he reported breathlessly. Kozlov is asking for Jessica by name. He says if she comes out, he'll let everyone else live. Absolutely not, Blake said immediately. Blake, if it would save everyone else. No, his voice brooked no argument. That's exactly what they want. The moment you show yourself, you're dead, and then they kill everyone else anyway. Rodriguez wiped blood from his eyes. What's the play, Harrison? Blake studied the ballroom layout, his tactical mind clearly working through scenarios. They expect us to run or hide. Instead, we're going to turn this into a trap. He quickly outlined his plan. The ballroom had 3 entrances: main door, service door, and emergency exit. By positioning themselves strategically and using the furniture as cover, They could create a crossfire situation when Kozlov's team entered. "What about me?" I asked. "You're going to be the bait," Blake said, and my blood turned to ice. "Excuse me?" "Not real bait," he clarified quickly. "We're going to make them think you're in the far corner behind the piano. Chen will be there with a decoy. Her hair is similar to yours in this lighting. Meanwhile, you'll be hidden in the old dumbwaiter behind the bar." Agent Chen was already moving furniture to create better defensive positions. "How do we know they'll fall for it?" "Because they're expecting us to protect Jessica exactly the way we would protect any high-value target," Blake explained. "They won't expect us to use unconventional tactics." As they prepared their trap, I found myself studying Blake's movements. 3 years ago, I'd thought I knew everything about him. I'd watched him fix breakfast, help me study for exams, hold me during thunderstorms. But this version of Blake, calculating, lethal, completely in control, was someone I'd never met. "Blake," I said quietly as he checked his weapon. "Earlier, when you said you never stopped caring what happened to me." He looked up, and for just a moment, the professional mask slipped. "Jessica, now isn't the time." "Actually, it might be exactly the time," I interrupted. "If we don't make it out of here, I need to know. Why did you really leave 3 years ago?" Blake glanced at Rodriguez and Chen, both of whom were pointedly not listening to our conversation while they set up defensive positions. "Because I found out that my assignment was surveillance on your father," he said quietly. "I was supposed to get close to his family, gather intelligence on his sources and methods. When I realized I was in love with you, I couldn't go through with it." The confession hit me like a physical blow. "You were spying on my family?" "Initially, yes. But Jessica, everything between us was real. My feelings, our relationship, none of that was fake. But you left instead of telling me the truth." "I left because I couldn't protect you from my world, and I couldn't betray your father. It was the only choice that kept you safe." Before I could respond, we heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. Blake immediately shifted back into tactical mode. "Positions, everyone. Jessica, get to the dumbwaiter now." I squeezed myself into the cramped space behind the bar, my wedding dress bunched around me in the small compartment. Through a crack in the panel, I could see Agent Chen crouched behind the piano, wearing my veil to complete the illusion. The main door to the ballroom opened slowly, and Vincent Kozlov stepped inside, followed by 2 other men carrying assault rifles. In the emergency lighting, they looked like shadows of death. "Miss Martinez," Kozlov called out in his accented English, "I know you're in here. This can be very simple, or it can be very painful. The choice is yours." Blake's voice came from somewhere near the service door. "She's not going anywhere with you." Kozlov smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Agent Harrison, I was hoping we would meet again." "Again?" Blake's surprise was evident in his voice. "Prague 2019. You cost me a very lucrative contract when you arrested my client. I've been looking forward to returning the favor." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about my father's story. This was also Blake's past coming back to haunt us both. From my hiding spot in the dumbwaiter, I watched the standoff unfold like a deadly chess match. Kozlov's men had fanned out across the ballroom, using overturned tables and chairs for cover, while Blake's team maintained their defensive positions. "Prague was business, Kozlov," Blake called out, his voice echoing from somewhere near the emergency exit. "This is personal vengeance disguised as a contract." Kozlov laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Perhaps, but I am being paid very well to make Roberto Martinez suffer, and killing his daughter on her wedding day. That is poetry." Agent Rodriguez fired a warning shot that splintered the doorframe inches from Kozlov's head. "You talk too much." The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire exploded from multiple directions as both teams engaged. I pressed myself deeper into the cramped space, my grandmother's wedding dress torn and dirty, my hands shaking as bullets shattered champagne glasses and tore through flower arrangements. Agent Chen, still wearing my veil as a disguise, rolled from behind the piano to a new position near the bar. One of Kozlov's men took the bait, firing in her direction while shouting something in what sounded like Russian. "Target behind the piano!" he yelled. Blake used the distraction to advance from his position. moving with a fluidity that spoke of extensive combat training. This was a side of him I'd never imagined. Lethal, precise, completely focused on eliminating threats. Through the crack in the panel, I saw him engage one of Kozlov's men in close combat. The fight was brief and decisive, ending with the assassin unconscious on the floor and Blake retrieving his weapon. 2 down. Agent Rodriguez reported through his comm. But Kozlov was nowhere to be seen. Agent Chen signaled to Blake, pointing toward the service door. Kozlov had apparently retreated, but whether he was regrouping or fleeing wasn't clear. "Jessica," Blake called out softly. "Status report." "I'm okay," I whispered back, though okay was relative when you're hiding in a dumbwaiter during a gunfight at your own wedding reception. Blake approached the bar area, keeping his weapon raised and his eyes scanning for threats. When he reached my hiding spot, he carefully opened the panel. "We need to move," he said, helping me out of the cramped space. "Kozlov is still loose in the building, and we don't know if he called for backup." My legs were stiff from being cramped in the small space, and my dress was completely ruined. But I was alive, which seemed like the most important thing at the moment. Agent Rodriguez was checking the 2 unconscious men when his earpiece crackled with an urgent message. "All units, be advised. We have multiple vehicles approaching the venue. At least 6 armed individuals exiting vehicles in the parking area." Blake cursed under his breath. Kozlov did call for reinforcements. "How many people want me dead?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the escalating situation. "Half." "Right now, that's not our biggest concern," Blake replied grimly. "Our biggest concern is getting out of here alive." Agent Chen had moved to the main windows, peering carefully through the emergency lighting. "I count 8 hostiles taking positions around the building. They're not just here to kill Jessica, they're here to eliminate all witnesses." The weight of that realization settled over me like a lead blanket. Everyone I loved was in danger because of my father's investigative work and my connection to Blake's past cases. "What about the families?" I asked desperately. "Are they safe in the basement?" "For now," Rodriguez replied, "but if Kozlov's people breach the safe room..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Blake was already formulating a new plan. "Jen, how many rounds do we have left?" "Enough for maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire," she replied. "Rodriguez?" "Same. We're going to run out of ammunition before we run out of targets." Blake pulled out his phone and made a call. "This is Agent Harrison. Badge number 7749. I need immediate tactical support at Riverside Manor, 1247 Elm Creek Road. Multiple federal agents under fire, civilian hostages in immediate danger." The voice on the other end was barely audible, but I caught the words, 15 minutes. "We don't have 15 minutes, Blake said into the phone. "We need air support and a full tactical team now." As if to emphasize his point, automatic weapons fire erupted from outside the building, the windows shattered, sending glass cascading across the ballroom floor. "They're making their move," Chen observed, taking cover behind an overturned table. Blake grabbed my hand. "Jessica, I need you to listen to me very carefully. We're going to make our way to the basement to link up with your family. Once we're there, we're going to hold that position until backup arrives." "What if backup doesn't arrive in time?" Blake's expression was grim but determined. "Then we make our last stand protecting the people we care about." As we prepared to leave the ballroom, I heard a voice I didn't recognize shouting from the main hallway. "Harrison! Agent Blake Harrison!" Blake froze. "That's not Kozlov." "Harrison, this is Colonel Viktor Petrov, formerly of Russian military intelligence. You destroyed my operation in Budapest 2 years ago. Tonight, I will collect my debt." Another ghost from Blake's past, another enemy seeking revenge through me and my family. "How many people have you pissed off in your career?" I whispered. "Apparently more than I realized," Blake replied grimly. Agent Rodriguez had moved to the doorway, weapon ready. "Harrison, we've got movement on 3 sides. They're coordinating a synchronized assault." "Time to go," Blake said, pulling me toward the service door. "Stay low, stay quiet, and whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." We moved through the service corridors of Riverside Manor like ghosts, Blake leading the way with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. The sounds of our pursuers echoed through the building. Footsteps, shouted commands in multiple languages, the occasional burst of gunfire. "How do you know this building so well?" I asked as we navigated a narrow hallway I'd never seen before. "I've been studying the blueprints since yesterday," Blake replied. "Standard security protocol when protecting a target." We reached a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Blake entered a code into the electronic lock, and the door opened to reveal a staircase leading down to the basement level. "How did you know the code?" "I didn't," Blake said with a slight smile, "but Agent Chen is very good at electronic surveillance." As we descended the stairs, I could hear voices from below, familiar voices. David, my parents, Blake's team members who had escorted the families to safety. But I also heard something else, David's voice, raised in anger. "I don't care what kind of agent he is," David was saying. "I want to know why my wife's ex-boyfriend happens to be the FBI agent assigned to protect her. That's not a coincidence." Patricia's voice tried to calm him. "David, this isn't the time." "No, Mom Martinez, this is exactly the time," David interrupted. "My wife has been lying to me all day, and I want to know why." Blake stopped on the stairs, his hand tightening on mine. "Jessica, whatever happens down there, remember that I'm trying to keep everyone alive. That includes your marriage." "My marriage might not survive this day regardless," I said quietly. "It will if you want it to," Blake replied. "David loves you. He just needs to understand that what happened between us is in the past." But even as he said the words, I could see in his eyes that he wasn't entirely convinced they were true. The basement safe room fell silent as Blake and I entered. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward us. My family, David's family, our wedding party, and the remaining FBI agents. But the only eyes I focused on were David's, filled with hurt and confusion and barely contained anger. "Jessica," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I think you and I need to have a conversation." Before I could respond, the sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from directly above us. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling as bullets punched through the floor. "They've breached the main level," Agent Rodriguez reported, pressing his earpiece. "Tactical Team ETA is still 12 minutes out." Blake immediately shifted into command mode, but David stepped forward, blocking his path. "Before anyone else dies today, I want to know the truth," David said firmly. "All of it." The basement lights flickered as more gunfire echoed overhead. This wasn't the time or place for marital counseling, but David clearly wasn't going to be deterred. "David," I began, but Blake interrupted. "I was Jessica's boyfriend for 3 years," he said bluntly. "I was undercover, investigating her father's sources for a federal task force. I fell in love with her, realized I couldn't betray her family, and disappeared rather than choose between my mission and my feelings." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of combat above us. David stared at Blake, then at me, then back at Blake. "You were living a lie for 3 years?" "Yes," Blake replied without hesitation. "And you," David turned to me, "you married me without telling me that the love of your life was a federal agent who abandoned you for his job?" "David, it's not that simple." "Actually, it is that simple," David interrupted. "Either you love him or you love me. Either our marriage is real or it's a rebound from the man standing right there." Another burst of gunfire, this time closer. Agent Chen was monitoring the stairwell, her weapon drawn. "This is really not the time," Carmen said desperately. But David was right, and I knew it. In the midst of this chaos, with assassins trying to kill us and my ex-boyfriend risking his life to protect me, I owed my husband the truth. "I loved Blake completely," I said, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. "He broke my heart when he left, and I spent 2 years putting myself back together. Then I met you, and you gave me something I'd never had with Blake: peace, stability, a future I could count on." "But do you love me?" David asked quietly. The question hung in the air as explosions shook the building above us. Through it all, I looked at my husband, kind, loyal David, who deserved so much better than this complicated mess. "Yes," I said firmly, "I love you." Differently than I loved Blake, but completely and truly. Blake's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Acceptance, perhaps, or resignation. David nodded slowly, then turned to Blake. And you? Are you here to protect her, or are you here to get her back? Blake met David's gaze directly. I'm here to make sure she goes home to her husband tonight. The sincerity in his voice seemed to satisfy David, because he stepped aside just as Agent Chen called out urgently. Movement on the stairs! Multiple hostiles descending! Blake immediately took charge. Everyone who's not armed, get behind the reinforced wall. Chen, Rodriguez, cover the stairwell. This is our line in the sand. Patricia grabbed my arm. Mija, you should come with us. No, I said, surprising myself. I'm tired of hiding while other people fight my battles. Blake turned to me sharply. Jessica, you're not trained for combat. But I am trained to think, I interrupted, and I have an idea. David, still processing everything that had been revealed, looked at me with concern. What kind of idea? These men aren't here just to kill me, I said quickly, my mind racing. They're here to send a message to Dad. But what if we could turn that around? What if we could send a message back? Blake was listening despite the approaching footsteps on the stairs. What are you thinking? Dad's story. The one that started all this. It's about money laundering, right? These people are willing to commit multiple murders to stop it from being published. That means it's devastating to them. Roberto stepped forward from behind the protective barrier. Jessica, the story is already with my editor. Even if they kill me, it will still be published. But they don't know that, I said urgently. Blake, can your people patch me through to Kozlov? Absolutely not, Blake said immediately. Listen to me, I pressed on. If I can convince him that killing me won't stop the story, but that letting me live might help them minimize the damage, maybe we can end this without more bloodshed. Agent Chen called out from the stairwell. 30 seconds until they reach the bottom. David grabbed my hand. Jessica, you just married me. I'm not letting you negotiate with killers. And I'm not letting anyone else die for my father's story, I replied firmly. Blake was torn between his protective instincts and his tactical judgment. Finally, he made a decision. Chen, patch me through to Kozlov on the building's PA system, he ordered. Blake, what are you doing? Agent Rodriguez asked. Trusting my wife, Blake said, then caught himself. Trusting Jessica. The correction wasn't lost on David, who squeezed my hand tighter. Kozlov's voice crackled through the intercom system. Agent Harrison, are you ready to discuss terms? Blake handed me the microphone. Remember, you're buying time for tactical support to arrive. I took a deep breath and keyed the mic. Mr. Kozlov, this is Jessica Martinez-Williams. I understand you have an issue with my father's upcoming article. Mrs. Williams, Kozlov replied, his accent thick with amusement. How refreshing to hear from the bride directly. I want to make you an offer, I said, hoping my voice sounded calmer than I felt. My father's story is already published and scheduled to run. Killing me won't stop it. But I might be able to convince him to delay publication if you and your men leave here right now. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of tactical boots on concrete stairs. You would sacrifice your father's career to save your own life? I would sacrifice anything to save the people I love, I replied truthfully. Another pause, then Kozlov's laughter echoed through the basement. Mrs. Williams, you are either very brave or very foolish. Unfortunately for you, my contract specifies that you must die today. Your father's story is merely, collateral damage. Blake took the microphone back. Then you've just made the last mistake of your career, Kozlov. At that moment, the building shook with a thunderous roar that definitely wasn't gunfire. Through the basement windows, I could see searchlights flooding the grounds. FBI tactical units have arrived, Agent Rodriguez announced, grinning widely. Full air support, armored vehicles, the works. The sound of helicopters filled the air, followed by amplified voices demanding surrender. Within minutes, the gunfire above us ceased entirely. All hostiles neutralized, came a voice through Blake's earpiece. Safe room occupants can proceed to the surface. As we made our way back upstairs, David walked beside me, still holding my hand despite everything that had been revealed. So what happens now? he asked quietly. I looked at him, then at Blake, who was coordinating with the tactical team, then back at my husband. Now we go on our honeymoon, I said firmly, and we start our marriage with complete honesty. David smiled for the first time since the crisis began. I can live with that. 3 hours later, after statements to federal investigators and tearful reunions with our families, David and I finally had our first dance as husband and wife in the parking lot of Riverside Manor, with FBI floodlights providing the ambiance and Agent Chen's car radio providing the music. Blake watched from a distance, talking on his phone with what I assumed were federal prosecutors. Before David and I left for our rescheduled reception at a nearby hotel, I walked over to him. "Thank you," I said simply. "For keeping you alive?" "For keeping your promise," I replied. "You said you'd make sure I went home to my husband tonight." Blake nodded, a sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "For what it's worth, he's a good man. He loves you the way you deserve to be loved." "And you?" "I'll always love you, Jessica, but loving someone sometimes means knowing when to let them go." As David and I drove away from the most chaotic wedding day in history, I realized that sometimes the best way to start a marriage is by confronting the truth about your past, surviving literal gunfire together, and choosing love in spite of everything trying to tear you apart. 6 months later, my father's story won a Pulitzer Prize. Vincent Kozlov and his associates were sentenced to life in prison. Blake was promoted and transferred to the FBI's white-collar crime division, where his targets were less likely to shoot at weddings. And David and I? We celebrated our 6-month anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. No FBI protection required. Finally living the peaceful life we'd both wanted all along. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.